Hello from LifeSci Consulting in London as we kick off our series of talks with senior leaders in the life sciences industry. And it's an absolute pleasure to have Barbara Lopez Kunz with me today to open this series of talks. Barbara, welcome.
Thank you, Nick. It's a pleasure to be here.
Why don't we just kick things off by, you've got a fantastic career over a relatively long period of time. Why don't we just kick things off with you giving us a little bit of an overview of the career you've had and the different roles that you've had over the course of that career?
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for those comments. I've been very fortunate in my career to have had the opportunity to work really across the wholeness of the life science and health spectrum, from my early years as a researcher through roles in commercialization to my most recent roles as someone who helps to affect public policy and also at the board level. And I would say that that was a choice that I made early in my career because I was raised with a really strong value system where I felt that I wanted to get into an area where I felt like I could give back, and supporting patients and families and communities has been central to the decisions that I've made. But I had to learn how to do that. And so I started out as a researcher, as I said, and I was able to work in research and commercial jobs in industry, mostly in large companies like ICI, which you'll recognize as having spun off AstraZeneca and Syngenta and other organizations. I also worked in DuPont and finally worked in Thermo Fisher. And so you'll appreciate that through that vector, I was able to experience drugs, devices, diagnostics, et cetera. Then I made a decision to go into more of what I would consider an academic world when I was recruited to go to Batelle, which is a very, very large research organization. In that role, I was the global head of everything health and life sciences worldwide. And I was able to work across the entire spectrum of public health, product development, et cetera. And I was able to make real contributions working in many times, in many cases, in collaboration with universities and other research institutions like the NIH here in the US, FDA, other regulatory agencies, the CDC, and so on. And then finally, I was recruited to lead an organization called DIA, the Drug Information Association, which is a very large international membership organization that really works at the system level to try to work to facilitate product development, therapeutic development. And by doing that job, I was able to learn how to convene the stakeholder community in health and life sciences. And from that point of view, I ended up over the last many, many years taking various board roles because I had an appreciation for and knowledge in various aspects of the whole, I call it the bioeconomy, if you will, the health and life sciences market broadly. And I have a network of people that have been central to my knowledge, who have helped me to advance and learn. And so, that's me. I don't consider myself a specialist in any particular silo within that organization, but I'm a connector. I'm a problem solver, and I'm a strategist. And that's really been very, very interesting for me through my career to have those roles.
I think thank you. I think it's a fabulous story to be able to sit there today, having started off with that value set around wanting to have had an impact, and then being able to play so many different roles. I mean, you describe it as a connector, effectively an orchestrator of many different aspects of this industry over the course of that career, and to have been able to, I guess, live those values and bring those values to life as a result. It's a great story. Having
Thank you, Nick.
been, sorry, go ahead, Barbara.
I was only going to add that being able to be on hospital boards has really brought it home for me. So you can be in product development, you can be in an agency, but to see where the rubber hits the road, if you will, where the point of care actually cures patients, improves lives of families, that's where I really felt like I was able to come to the fullness of the appreciation for what the career has really been all about. So,
well, and I think
until
you've seen the challenges that arise in the day-to-day delivery of care, and as you say, what it looks like when the rubber actually hits the road, it's somewhat difficult to grasp exactly some of the circumstances that we're attempting to improve. over the course of that, over that sort of arc of career, I'd be interested in getting your perspective on a couple of things. One is what's changed from your perspective in terms of the perhaps the biggest changes that you've seen in the industry over the course of that time, but also what remains the same. And maybe some of it comes back to that rubber hitting the road that we were just talking about, but I'm sure there are some other things you can comment on as well too.
Well, what's changed? I smiled when you asked me because everything has changed. I mean, it's been remarkable. I was thinking about this the other day when I was speaking with someone from the sort of tech sector. I remember the early days of technology when I was a researcher, and we were talking about artificial intelligence, and it sounded like science fiction. And you know, fast forward, here we are today, where if you don't know about it, you better learn about it because it is real and with us all the time. And the whole advent of generative um, AI is here and will be an important part of our future. But going back, we've lived through this sort of explosion of the biology economy, the bioeconomy, if I can use that language. We've seen the advent of genetic medicine back in the 90s and just a complete change in our understanding of how various diseases work and how interventions can be built. I never thought that I'd live through an era where there are actually cures for many diseases. There are interventions that work. There are people who are living worldwide with cancer. They're living with cancer. I mean, when I was young, you got that call and you knew that what the answer was, and it wasn't a good answer. So I think the combination of the explosion of data science leading all the way to artificial intelligence, machine learning, combined with this explosion of the bioeconomy, has allowed us to live through, I think, some of the most exciting years in our history. And it's only going to get better. It's only going to get better. We're on the early stages of some of these fields that I mentioned, and it's going to get better as we learn more, as we find interesting applications, as patients understand how to get more involved in their healthcare, and as technology continues to advance and improve. So a lot has changed and a lot will continue to change. I also think I consider myself a people first executive. I think some of the elements about how we are, who we are, how we work, how we interact has changed dramatically as well. In fact, I was thinking about this when I was reading about some of these, going back to the office post-pandemic ideas that are going on. And I was thinking that I remember when I was, a younger person and I had small children, and, although people talked about things like flex time, there really wasn't flex time. I mean, you were sort of like punching in, punching out, just whatever you were doing, people expected to see it turn up. And today, when I think about how I work and how people around me work, we're so much more productive and effective, and we're so much more integrated in life with being able to take the time for our families, our friends, our personal, situations, our health, and to do our jobs as well, and to do them at an even higher level. So I wanted to comment on how like the ways of working have really changed over my career, and I know with my own family, the differences that they have and how they operate are just remarkable. And I'm a little jealous that I wasn't able to have them, but I'm super happy that maybe I was one of the people that helped to inspire and instill those kinds of changes.
Yeah, and it's
So you asked me what. Go ahead.
no. I was going to say that's a really good point, well made there. And in some ways, you've got happier, more satisfied people who are able to deal with all of the challenges of modern life, and therefore we're able to contribute more effectively. It's a good take on what is a very big topic for many people at the moment around how to maintain pre-pandemic levels of productivity and worker engagement and learning and development and all of these topics which we spend a lot of time talking to clients about. But that's a good take on it, a different perspective.
Yeah, it's very, very important. And I think I would be remiss not to comment about the regulatory environment. There have been profound changes in the way regulators are working as well. And I know when I was a product developer, there was this imagination that somehow the regulators would always slow you down. They would always stop you in your tracks. And having worked very closely with regulatory agencies around the globe, I've seen the regulators really endorse and adopt new ways of working, incorporate data rich methods and data into their decision making, to work to harmonize processes, to become much more sort of outwardly patient-focused, partner-focused, and to try to harmonize across geographic boundaries. And so, that's another area I think that's worthy of mentioning, because that again is in the early days. I look at the regulatory community, and through their collaborative efforts, they're trying to help developing markets build those regulatory policy elements into how they work so that they can harmonize, so that industry players can get their therapeutics through approval much more rapidly. So I've always also experienced that. And then lastly, I think it's worth mentioning that patients have become way more understanding and engaged in their health, and that's by necessity. I remember my parents, they would turn up at their doc, and it was kind of like, whatever that person said, they would go off and do without question. Now people read, people understand, people know what options they have, and they make decisions about their own health, and that needs to continue as well.
And I guess that creates a challenge or an opportunity for the industry to be able to furnish patients with better, more accurate, high quality information. Because I think we both know there's a lot of misinformation out there that people can rely on in making some of those decisions. And I think, for me, certainly the accuracy, the quality, the availability, and democratizing some of that sort of key healthcare information is a really important topic as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, patients need to become much more informed. They need to take time to source from reputable resources, whether they're on the internet or how they're getting it. They need to talk to experts in the field, and they need to balance out what's right for them. So I think that's another important advance that I've seen over the years, and one that's long overdue and very welcome. But you asked me what's stayed the same, or perhaps what hasn't changed. What hasn't changed? So when I think about that, there is an absolute huge amount of diseases that have absolutely no intervention. So if I look in the rare disease area, I think the numbers are something like 7,000 rare diseases. I think only a small fraction, less than 10%, have any kind of intervention whatsoever. And I bring that up first because the big elephant in the room is the cost of research to create those interventions. And if you look at this whole field of precision medicine or personalized medicine, which in the limit means an N of 1 therapeutic, I mean, the cost of doing that with the regimens that we use today is just prohibitive. It's just not going to happen. So that whole field, if we're going to really leverage the benefits of the biotech evolution and data science evolution and incorporation of AI, generative AI, we really need to think about the processes that underlie that therapeutic development process. And there's been a lot that's been done, but there's a lot that needs to happen still, because we can't go forward with the price tags today that are really unaffordable for patients. And so I wanted to talk about that as an important thing that continues to need intervention. It continues to need support. And it's a big problem. So I'm not sitting here saying like I have some magic solution. I mean, like any big problem, it needs to be broken down into component parts. And there has been progress on a number of subtopics, but we need to continue to work on it.
Well, and it's a topic for as you say, for everyone, regulators, in terms of how they support and create the right regimen around the sort of the trial and the approval of those solutions. The industry itself, in terms of how it collaborates and partners around the sort of ecosystem in order to make those things more successful than they are today. And also even sort of the investor community in terms of how they look at the return on investment from some of these activities as well too, which is going to change over time, as well as things get more and more, as you say, N of 1, more and more unique, more and more bespoke, and increasingly tailored.
Absolutely.
You made a comment in your what has changed around the sort of regulatory environment, and perhaps it's related to that last point. How much do you think that regulatory environment was changing in the lead up to the COVID-19 pandemic? And as a result, the public's sort of expectation of how quickly the regulatory environment can support approval of new products was accelerated by that, or whether that's really been a game changer and there are new things that have arisen as a result of our experiences in getting some of those vaccines approved quickly, and I guess public perception being or public awareness being heightened as to the importance of the regulatory process and getting new product to patients faster. And
Yeah, I can tell you, I'm quite certain, quite confident that the regulatory community was working to accelerate their approval processes. As you know, there are accelerated processes in place with many of the developed agencies in the developed world. Um, they were also looking at benefit risk and trying to make good decisions around, how to allow patients to access treatments earlier in the regimen. So the incorporation of data, real world data, the integration of it into decision making for the regulatory community has long been part of what they've been working on. And frankly, I think was really catalytic to the ability to take the vaccines that were had been in play, the technologies that had been in play for many decades, and turn them into effective vaccines that could get approval fairly quickly. I've always said that I believe the regulators can be very efficient uh, and effective when provided with the information that they need. And so I've been an advocate for having pre-meetings with the regulatory community, understanding what they're looking for, interacting with them along the pathway so that when it comes to approval, they're not going back and forth trying to request more data. I think the pandemic was really an opportunity for them, for the agencies, to bring to bear what they've been working on all along. So I'm super proud of how quickly they were able to get those vaccines out and continue to get vaccines out that are necessary for the variants that keep emerging.
yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point there in saying that the regulatory environment was in some ways ready to go and therefore a critical enabler rather than sort of reactive to the set of circumstances that we as a global population found ourselves in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to minimize at all the amount of effort that it took for that to happen, because I know many of them and they were working 24/7 to do what needed to be done, as were people in industry and so on, to get the medicines made and to get them produced in the way that they were needed. But I think a lot of the sort of foundational elements that were necessary to do that were in place.
Okay. We've talked already a little bit about the return on investment from, or the productivity, I guess, return on investment from R&D as one of the key challenges facing the industry, as well as the move towards more personalised healthcare and the number of rare diseases that are out there. Without sort of revisiting perhaps those points, given where you sit and the positions that you hold today, what do you think are the sort of top, let's just say, three either issues or opportunities that you see as go forward strategic issues for boards, chief executives, and other key leaders in the industry to be thinking about? What's top of mind for you, I guess, at the moment?
Yeah. You know, I would say that we've really touched on them. Top of mind for me is really continuing to get the therapeutic development pathway optimized. When I look at what's going on today, there are so many startup companies, there are ideas that have come out from universities, and particularly here in the United States, where funding has become very, very difficult. And so there is an opportunity for us to figure out how to get those medicines more quickly into the hands of patients by figuring out how to get more effective in the drug development pathway. And we have many things that have happened along the way. We've talked about a lot of them. I'm not going to go back and revisit, but if we don't continue to speed that up, we are going to lose the opportunity to bring those cures to bear. I think another topic is that we haven't talked about and is worth mentioning is the entirety of um, integrating diversity, equity, and inclusion, and not just in drug development and clinical trials, clinical innovation, but also in healthcare delivery, so that we get equity in healthcare access. Uh, that really came to light through the pandemic when we saw how underserved communities were faring through that versus people have more ready access to medicines. This is a thing that none of us should be proud of. I mean, it's when I think about it, it really makes me very animated to want to try to do more. And I can tell you that on the boards that I sit, on the hospital boards in particular, this is an active topic. It's an active topic, not just in terms of the funding, because many of the hospitals, particularly the pediatric hospitals, treat patients regardless of their ability to pay, but many of them don't. Um, many of them make decisions that are very, very difficult and damaging, and in some cases deadly for families. So I really want to see those kind of topics continue to be high up on the agenda. These topics that we're talking about, the therapeutic development process, the integration of AI and data into our decisions. Um, we haven't talked about technology, but the use of sensors and wearables and remote monitoring and all of those things. And then the healthcare equity issue. These are topics that are so incredibly complicated. But the way I've been successful in my career is I've tended to take these complicated problems and to take them down into like smaller components so that you can address one at a time, and also bring the people together who have the knowledge and have the ability to make decisions in those sub areas, to get them to talk to each other so that there's a mutual understanding of what the issues really are and how we can work together to make those advances.
And that's back to the orchestrator role that we were sort of talking about at the beginning, bringing together the right partners. And I think one of the things we spend a lot of time working with our clients on is, there is plenty of innovation to be had outside of the individual organization, but there's so much of it. How do you find the right partners? How do you bring people together in the right way? How do you make that mutually beneficial for everybody to spend their time sort of coalesced around those key challenges that you're talking about? And individuals such as yourself play such a key role in joining those dots from the positions that you occupy. It's a critical role.
Absolutely. I'll quote one of my board members when I was the CEO of DIA. She said, if an organization like DIA didn't exist, we'd have to create it, because there really aren't convenient or common forums for those kinds of conversations, and particularly those that don't have a pony in the race, if you will. You sit at the table and you're not a developer, you're not a regulator, you're not a clinician, you're not a payer. So all you're doing is to try to get to the right answer. Somebody needs to do that. Somebody needs to do
Well,
that.
and by doing that, you often encourage others to tie their pony up outside as well too, and just focus on the challenge or the particular question that you're trying to solve for at that moment in time.
Absolutely.
One of the topics that you and I have spoken about before, Barbara, is the sort of topic, a much more global one around geography and the role that different geographies are playing in the future of healthcare as well too. I know one of the areas of particular focus for you is Asia and China in particular. What are your sort of thoughts on key focus areas as regards to geography and a bit more of a global perspective?
Yes. So when I took my role at DIA, it was very clear to me that there was an explosion going on in some countries in Asia with respect to therapeutic development and company formation as a result of that. And there wasn't the understanding of how to really leverage the global access points as well as the local citizenry. And some of that was built in the sort of international collaborations that existed or not, understanding of the regulatory regimes that existed outside the countries of interest. And so we went to work to try to fix some of those problems. And I'll talk just about China for a bit, just because it's been such a incredible focus for so many organizations, and certainly was for DIA over the years where I led that organization. Over the time from the beginning of my tenure, we were able to take what was then the CFDA. We supported them in understanding how to be part of the regulatory regimes that existed in other parts of the world. And so we helped the CFDA, now the NMPA, understand and become admitted into the ICH, and now become part of the ICH Management Committee. And I think that was very important, because you might remember days where some of the issues around manufacturing of therapeutics and foods and so on, there were real serious issues. And so I think that was a really good example of what was necessary. And that was really go in as a neutral organization to provide the training and development, to create the connections between other parts of the world where there was an interest in ensuring good practice, and creating a level of energy and independence around what they could do. And I think as a result of that, it's been a tremendous step change. And I'm not going to talk about current geopolitics, because I think that's something that we were aware of, but not really appropriate to this conversation. But I think that now, if you look at what's happening in places like India and Korea and so on, they're following suit. And I'm really encouraged, to be honest, to see some of those countries recognizing that they have to have an effective and globally aligned drug development and regulatory process in place for medicines to be approved for their local populations, and also to have that opportunity to share those innovations with others around the globe.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to hear. And I think that from my perspective, the that engagement drives an openness, starts to build understanding, and also establish trust, which in my mind can only build a more effective and more collaborative global life sciences ecosystem anyway. And certainly, as you talk about some of those rare diseases and topics like diversity, the prevalence of those diseases and the patient populations and where they are geographically is another huge topic I know for the industry, and so therefore our ability to collaborate across borders to execute trial and approval activity, and then to distribute medicine and interventions globally is critical.
Absolutely. I don't want to sound naive, but I like to
I don't
just kind of
visionary. I think from
I
your
like.
from your position, I think it's visionary rather than naive, Barbara. But
Well, I think most people want to do the right thing. I mean, I think people fundamentally want to have a life where they have, take care of their children, they take care of their families, they want to have access to healthcare, they want to have access to education. And so I come from the point of view that, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, yet the fundamental human drivers are the same. And we should work together to make those, those aspirations a reality for people around the
yeah,
globe.
well, and I mean, there's no grace. What do they say? There's no grace leveler than illness, right? And
Oh,
perhaps some of the illnesses
absolutely.
that are prevalent in different geographies are different, but everybody gets unwell. Everybody has loved ones who gets unwell, and so we've got a common human interest in addressing those things.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. The pandemic put that right square in front of our faces. We were all doing the same thing. We were all dealing with the same traumas and tragedies. And hopefully we've all learned from
Yeah,
that.
no, you're right. All right, last sort of question. I guess as you've alluded to over the course of our conversation, you've held both sort of executive, day-to-day leadership positions, and still do, as well as board roles, whether it be with the hospitals that you work with, or any of the other number of organisations where you've had the opportunity to hold more of what I would call a governance type role. What are the key? I mean, I understand there are some fundamental differences, but from your perspective, from in terms of the way that you think about those roles, what are the key differences?
Yeah. I was very lucky to get invited to be a board director on a nonprofit board very early in my career. And I have to say that that really helped me to understand how to look at an organization from the most senior strategic level, and how to build together and bring together and meld, if you will, the various aspects of the business that have to be done well for a strategy to make sense, but not just from an internal point of view. The board's role is quite unique because you're working between, your investors, your stakeholders, and the organization. So there's absolute clarity around the value proposition that you deliver, because that's the conversation that the boards typically are engaged in. So from those early days, I've been on numerous boards, as you said, hospital boards, education-oriented boards, to the point where I got into more private boards, public boards, and so on. My role at the board table is always one who is more of a strategist. I consider myself strong financially. I'm also very strong in some of the issues related to people, compensation, and some of those elements. What's really rewarding about it is really that it's that I can see an organization from that vantage point, and I can really help to direct and to clarify what needs to happen, and also use that broad experience that I talked about earlier in our conversation to help the organizations improve and be successful. When I come to the table for a nonprofit organization versus a for-profit organization, in my mind, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it's an organization that needs to have a mission, a value proposition, and the economic strength to be able to be successful in delivering that value to their stakeholders or their customers. And so yeah, I feel very fortunate to have kind of bolted that whole career together with these opportunities and hope to continue to do so.
And I guess from, with your love of the sort of people side of leadership as well too, I guess being in those governance roles gives you the opportunity to also almost act as a coach to some of the key executives and leaders in those businesses as well, and help furnish them with advice and build and grow their careers as well too.
Absolutely. I can tell you that the number of conversations I've had offline with those kind of issues, I've hit this bump, tell me about it. And I can give some perspectives on what I would do, how I would think, and how I would act. And actually, recently, one of the people that I mentor said to me, have you ever written down the advice, the kind of nuggets of wisdom that you shared? And I've said, no, not really. And they replied, I'm writing them down, so I'm going to send them to you. So I thought that was actually quite flattering for me, because I don't consider myself worthy of being scripted, but I thought that was really fun.
Well, you might have a ghostwriter for a future sort of book on leadership there, or governance perhaps.
Yes, maybe. I don't know. It's not on my agenda at the moment, but maybe in the future.
Anyway, Barbara, I think that sort of wraps us up for today. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always. And I've learned, even though we've spent quite a bit of time together before, I've learned considerably more about you and the fabulous perspective that you provide on this industry that I know we both care a lot about. So thank you for dialing in from Washington, D.C. today. I really appreciate you joining.
Pleasure chatting with you, Nick. Thank you so much.
And that's all for the first of our Life Sci consulting talks with senior leaders in the industry, kicking off things with Barbara Lopez Kunz. Hopefully an enjoyable conversation for everybody to have tuned into, certainly an enjoyable one for me to host. And we look forward to sharing more of these conversations with you in the future. But for today, from Life Sci Consulting in London, goodbye.